if you want students to take risk, then write a learning outcome that says, in this project we would expect you to take risk, manage the risk, and work on an outcome which clearly shows that you've taken risk, for instance. Not a very good learning outcome, but so we are encouraging people to write the risk management within the learning outcomes. So I think that's the most direct way of doing it, because then it makes it clearer for the students, and they know that it's a competency that they're going to need to have if they're going to be a designer. So I think that, but also, I guess, by using examples where people have taken risk as well. But often it's about the process, isn't it? So if you just show them a final result of something which looks great, they don't see the process which dealt with the risk. So I think breaking down the process as well and showing the risk in the process is important as well. Yeah? Don't know whether that's clear. Any other questions before we start?
Yeah. As I told you that we are shifting away from, we are going to do 25 hours of contact hours every week, but we have built in self-study hours. And the concern is that whether students are going to take advantage of this to work on their own, or how do we make sure that everybody is doing that extra work which has been given to them, because we're not used to the system. We've been always doing monitored practical sessions and teaching, they're always, the faculty is always available when they're working on the rooms and things, So there is a concern that how do we monitor, we don't want to monitor it, but how do we ensure that every student takes advantage of this self-study hour
flexibility
and, works on their own. This is going to be I think this is a concern with many faculty.
Yeah. So my first reaction is 25 hours a week. God, that's an enormous amount of contact teaching hours. So if I was a student and had 25 hours contact, I think I'd have to spend the rest of the time in bed. So that's how I would use my non-contact hours, I think. And as I say, we have 12 hours, and still the project, so our 12 hours are around projects. So it's around the delivery and the focus and the tutorials and the seminars around the project. So students reach the learning outcomes through projects. So our vehicle are projects. And we have to, because we haven't got any time otherwise, but we have to trust that students are using the 12 hours contact time to support their projects, but then they're spending the rest of the time on the projects. Now, some students obviously are very methodical and they manage to do a certain amount of contact time or non-contact time, and they spend time in the studios and they do the project, and at the end you can see all the work that they've done in their own time. Other students just go to the contact time, do bits, but then it's this huge rush at the end where they do all the work for 2-3 weeks at the end, and they're working all night. Now, I was up at 6 o'clock this morning preparing some things this morning, so some people never lose that rush at the end doing it, so we just have to trust the students that they're going to do it. It will show in their grades if they haven't done it, because that non-contact time is the development time on the projects. So if there isn't that, they won't do it. So we find if it's not curriculum, generally they won't do it. They start off with good intentions, but they won't do it. If it's the time they need to complete projects, they'll do it, and they'll do it very well. So it's a bit of a glib answer, but in a way I look at 25 hours contact, and I think, oh, that's a lot of contact a day.
And our batch size is also huge.
Our
Maximum is like 35 for one faculty.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
have to punch in 40 hours a week as a faculty. So when you say, I was working on faculty workload recently, so I was told by the director that it sounds good, Anupam, but how I justify to my minister that faculty gives only 50% of their time in class? What they do rest of the time? So please push up. So they have to justify. So I think we also get someday some of the people probably don't understand academics at a different level. So there's kind of a pressure that so I have to justify, I'm a person who gives 8 hours every day, 5 days a week. So I must teach at least 5 hours. And 3 hours is the party time according to them. So I think that we also struggle with that.
So my job at Falmouth is Deputy Vice Chancellor, so I manage the student experience with the academic experience. So I developed this year a work allocation model. So because in the UK, a full-time contract, you'll teach 550 hours in total. So that in a year, 550. So that works out at about 18 hours a week for 18 hours a week, but that's for 12 weeks, 18 hours a week in the second semester, and then assessment time, feedback time, and then the third semester, which is the summer semester, for doing all the other things. So my balancing act is to make sure that people do the 18 hours a week contact teaching time, but also then effectively use the other time.
I had worked out a model which was around 1200 hours. So even 1200 hours a year, then I was told that I think let's push it up, it's less.
Yeah.
So push it to 1500.
Yeah. Contact time.
Yeah. Which also includes, I think, academic administration.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was doesn't include that.
So a lot of time goes in academic administration.
Yeah.
We have that.
Yeah.
A lot of paperwork. Because I think the numbers are huge, maybe because of that.
Yeah.
So you have that as well.
Yeah.
Academic administration as well as the vice chancellor.
Yeah. So if there's 550 teaching hours, there's about the same again academic administration. I can show you tomorrow how it breaks down actually, without creating too much of a furore. And it's just about asking people to work very hard in the teaching sessions. Obviously there'll be assessing in the other time, and then also to effectively use the third semester as well, so that there's other things that need to be done. But yeah, it's 550 hours, and probably the same again, teaching administration, so it's similar. Yeah.
One question.
Yes.
Regarding the assessment, what you said last day, what I felt that is there any specific module you have for the grading for the students, a fair grading for the students? So, in the case like to evaluate or judge a creative work of a student, is there something in a model you follow, measurable, judgmental, a components of the work? So, and will ensure somewhere to the students and the evaluators also that this is a fair thing which I am doing.
Yeah.
So, is there something in a model like that for the assessment?
It's a good question. Tomorrow I'll show our shared curriculum assessment tool that we have, and I don't think there's any easy answer to this. Obviously what we do is blind two people, both assess blindly. I think the big thing is to make sure you're assessing against learning outcomes. When you're assessing against learning outcomes with the same assessment criteria, then there has to be a certain amount of fairness, because you're both assessing the same thing. And then if you both do grades and bring the grades together and then negotiate whether that should go up or down or whether it's the same, I think that's the fairest way of doing it. As I said yesterday, I don't think there is a huge amount of variation when two lecturers get together with a piece of work in front of them. My experience is that you often find it's somewhere about the same, and that's my experience. And when it's not, it's really staff development, academic development to make sure that you bring in whatever views, explore. What we try and do is, if there's a big difference, we bring the two together, bring the head in, and say, okay, so why are you grading this? And often it's just one person who's got a different view or a different background or whatever is not aligned to where that needs to be. So I think there's a certain amount of staff development that needs to be done. But generally, I'd say they're about 95% in the same region. They agree quite quickly on what that is, even if it's a creative subject. So I think to answer, I think it's really, the model is assess against the learning outcomes, make sure that those learning outcomes are assessable against, and make sure that the assessment criteria is really clear. And almost the proof of that is what feedback you're going to give to the students. If two people are going to write that feedback, it should be something around the same, and the grade will be the same then as well. Yeah?
I had a question.
Yes.
How is it with you? Do you have a panel of faculty who is evaluating the work at the end of the module, or is it the same faculty?
Yeah, the faculty that, so say for instance it's fashion design, they're the faculty who, those faculty evaluate the modules that they've worked on.
Okay, so what I mean is, like, if I'm teaching a particular module, do I get to evaluate the whole 100 marks of it?
Yes, but you would always have somebody else evaluating alongside you.
Okay, so in our case what happens is we evaluate for 60 marks. And in the final project, which is 40 marks, we have the faculty is not supposed to be present in the jury, and we have
Now it has changed.
it has changed. No, but
It's
it's still external.
Now the teaching faculty will evaluate.
Okay. Okay, so now we have, yeah, it has changed. So previously what was happening is that we had, like, I didn't know that.
Now
Now the faculty will be there as an observer.
As an observer, but we are still not evaluating, right?
Up to evaluation.
basically what he's saying is
That's
60% is internal evaluation by the faculty and 40% is external. Other faculty.
External experts or faculty from other
That
departments.
was introduced around 10 years ago because students felt that faculty is biased.
Okay.
So maybe because I don't like him now. That was their presumption.
Yeah.
So even if he's doing better work, I may not give him better grades what he deserves.
Yeah.
So that component of external evaluation.
Yeah.
Earlier it was only for the final graduation project,
Yeah.
but around 10 years ago we introduced every semester.
So I've seen lots of different models. So, for instance, at Falmouth and most universities, the faculty that grade all the work. So they grade them all. We obviously have external examiners. I think you will have external examiners as well, who come and verify the grading and make sure that it's where it should be. And so they'll do some sampling, they'll look at some work, they'll talk to the whole set of students, and they'll say, yeah, okay, that's where it should be. So I think that's our...
Yeah, but it's the other way around. Like what the new plan is, like it's slightly the opposite of that. So we have an external panel who's evaluating and the faculty is observing. They're not marking the performance.
now.
So I saw that model at the Rietveld Academy, so I was a lecturer at the Rietveld Academy, and for the final project, as an external, I came in, graded everything, and the staff had to sit there, they weren't allowed to say anything. It's fantastic. For the external, not for the internal staff. So I wouldn't like to comment on it, because obviously every university has different models, but it's very commendable in a way to bring somebody in and do all the grading, but I also have some worries that obviously the faculty have seen the trajectory of the students, the process. They may have their favourites, but that's what the external examiner's there to do, to say, well, this person's a first, I don't think it's anywhere there. I think you're not marking it properly, I'd like it to be remarked and everything around that. So, yeah, I don't want to cause any friction, but I have been involved in both models, and the model where faculty have to let the external person come in, it's quite a difficult model. Good, I hope I'm not upsetting anybody there now.
I have a question regarding the group assignment assessment. Actually, what I feel that in a group of 4 students in a work, there is always 1 or 2 students who really work hard for the assignment, but the third one is the follower who do a sufficient amount of work. But there is always one clever student who don't contribute exactly in the assignment, but who give a very nice presentation or and who try to snatch the marks from other students. How to ensure that he will get only the marks that it deserves, that he deserves, because other students
He or
might
she.
affect he or she, because
He's always a he.
because the 1 or 2 students who really work hard, they
Yeah.
might get disappointed with the marks that the 4th one is
Yeah.
getting.
So, as we move, because one of our initiatives for 2030 is it's all got to be teamwork. There's different ways, I think, of dealing with that, and there's no perfect way, I would say. When I was at the Technical University in Eindhoven, one way we did that was to say, even though it's teamwork, you show your process and you show what you did and you develop towards your competencies. So we had a competency framework. You show what you've done towards that competency, and you're graded individually for your development on that group project. So there was no group grade at all. So it was really like, okay, you've all worked together, we expect that, and something's happened, very good, but we're not grading the final result. We're grading your process and your individual development towards that. Because in a group work, there might be somebody, for instance, who's very good at coding. So every time there's a bit of coding to do, they do the coding. But you don't want that student to do coding. You want to put themselves in a vulnerable position so they can pick up some of the other competences. So they might do the design work, or and somebody else does the coding, even though. So therefore, when you're grading their individual development and process, you're actually taking account of the fact that they're not doing coding but doing the other thing. So I think one very easy answer is to grade the process, grade it individually, and grade it against a competency framework. The more difficult thing is when you do want to give a grade for the group work. So we had our animators at Falmouth all work in groups all the way through the degree. So they have this problem, and they have developed something which is part self-assessment and part, and then a negotiation whether that's correct. So the students all get together and grade each other on what they did as part of the process. So one example is they always give Bs because that's the easiest thing to do. But there have been some cases where they know somebody hasn't worked and that group has graded the other person lower than this. Then the lecturer comes in with their grades because they've not stood back, they've been part of the process. So they'll grade it, and then they have a negotiation meeting to say, okay, here we are, I've graded here, you've graded here, do we agree with that? They have a negotiating meeting, and then those are the grades. And actually, that one student does get a less grade. So that went through our academic standards committee, and it was agreed that that was a method that we could use. So maybe I can send you that as well, as an example. But I think there's no easy answer, but I think that the best, if you can do it, is concentrate on process, concentrate on individual competency development, and grade them on that, and leave the team alone. And that actually moves it away from being all about the end product, because we know the end product's important, but not the most important. It's about the learning that happens on the project. So that's a long answer to a very difficult question, I think. Okay, so I'm going to start off now with just a little look at, we called it embedded employability. So how do you embed employability in a curriculum? Some of this is very simple, so apologies, but similarly was an approach to a university where some people do embedded employability brilliantly. It's all embedded in the curriculum. There's industries involved in every project. There's lots of teamwork and they deliver and things. To other areas where it's a desert, where people are not thinking about employability. They're still doing a kind of glint in the academic's eye project, and it's not working. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the bigger picture on employability. I'm going to try and define employability, because employability is a horrible word. Employability should be something around careers or something like that. Industry and graduate views, and again I have some videos, so I hope these videos are useful because some of them are very basic, but I think it is interesting to get different voices. Embedding employability skills and behaviours, sharing that practice. Our own strategy, I don't know how much time we have to spend on that, and there we go. So the bigger picture. So we have, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the next few days, we have an industrial strategy, the UK, and thank you. And the industrial strategy is universities are asked to work with the industrial strategy because obviously we have to deliver our industrial vision, and universities are supposed to be doing that. So we are charged in a way by looking at that industrial strategy. So as a modern British industrial strategy must make this country a fertile ground for new businesses and the new industries which will challenge and in some cases displace the companies and industries of today. And I think that's important, is that if we are allowing our students to think entrepreneurially, i.e. what could I do, what new products could I make, what new ways and behaviours could I make, then actually there's always a displacement then of the things that we think are careers now, and they're displaced with new careers. So as far as ourselves and science, research and innovation, we must become a more innovative economy. So I think innovation is something that Falmouth holds very dear, and the way that we commercialise our world-leading science base. So this is obviously the industrial strategy. So the way that we bring together science, research and innovation, ensure that the basic skills needed in a modern economy, building a system of technical education to benefit the half of young people who do not go to university. So we're saying those people who go to university, we've got to create pathways and opportunities for the other half who don't go to university, and support business to start and grow. So how do we develop businesses so there are businesses and jobs there to work? So one of the things that I think that we have is that we have a competitive edge in lots of different areas, probably with the creative industries. So how do we help sectors take advantage of that? How do we cultivate these world-leading sectors? How do we drive growth across the country? I'm sure it's the same in India, but we have a very big focus in London, less for when we have hotspots of focus across the country, across the UK. But how do we make sure that that focus is across the whole of the UK? And also, how do we bring universities together and institutions together to make a network that helps support that? So I think this is from the Creative Industries Council. They say it's an exciting and pivotal time for the UK creative industries. Recent statistics show the sector is increasing by 8.9% a year, making it second fastest expanding industrial sector. The value spreads beyond those industries into the wider economy, and it's something we spoke about yesterday. The wider economy is the one that's taking advantage of the core disciplines. So from a Cornish point of view, that's the region that Falmouth is in, the long leg of the UK. We say we can lead the UK and compete with the world in advanced engineering and digital innovation, driving growth of its large-scale aerospace, microelectronics, high-tech marine, engineering and energy sectors, whilst creating new industries across environmental technologies, digital health and the creative sector. So we've worked with our region to make sure that their strategy is in line with what the university is producing. I think that's an important thing, and I think Falmouth has been very good at that, to say in all of those areas, digital innovation, digital health and the creative sector, we are the university within your region who will help you do that. And as soon as you get the strategies aligned, the regional and the university, it means that you're working closely together. So we have projects around multi-generational living, bringing students living alongside old people, and that's sponsored, that's paid for by the local council because it's part of their strategy and part of our strategy. So I think that's important as well. So graduate recruitment, this is from Nesta, a institution that looks at the way creative industries and creative areas grow. So graduate recruitment is an important source of workers for the creative and digital sector. Employers increasingly seek a fusion of creative and technical skills combined with business and softer skills. So team working, motivational skills, the enthusiasm to solve problems and the desire to learn were especially highlighted. It's something that in 2015 was starting to be hinted at, but now actually there's been a little bit of a flip. But actually those skills in red are maybe the most important, because students, graduates are working in project teams to deliver projects with a multidisciplinary set of people delivering that project. And as a textile designer, you might not be working with textiles, but you're using your creative approach within the team to deliver a project on whatever it may be. So I feel as if those, what we used to call softer skills, have become the most important skills. So the teamwork, the motivational skill, what it does, how you are motivated, problem solving, and the desire to learn and learn more are really what employers are looking for. And we've got some videos of that as well. But we do need to do more to empower students, parents and employers to make more confident and informed choices about their education and career options, whether they are in schools, technical education or higher education universities. So that's the government there saying people seem to be taking subjects at university which are a little bit uninformed, and if they want to have a career path, they should make sure they're choosing the right university degrees. So if we try and define employability, so again, higher education academy, so we think employability is providing the opportunities to develop knowledge, skills, experiences, behaviours, attributes and attitudes to enable graduates to make successful transitions and contributions, benefiting them, the economy and the communities. I think that's a very good description of what employability is. It's not getting a job, because we all know, I don't know what your first job was, but it wasn't the job that I wanted to stay in for my career. Working behind the bar at the Chelsea Arts Club wasn't what I wanted to do. But that shows that it's about the knowledge, skills, experience, maybe more important, behaviours, attributes and attitudes that allows them to contribute and make that successful transition to contribute so that it benefits them, the economy and the community. I think that's a very good description of what we're trying to do. And if we try and think of what the value added is for a university student, all of those we have to deal with. So they also say employability goes well beyond the simplistic notion of key skills and is evidenced in the application of a mix of personal qualities and beliefs, understanding, skillful practices, and the ability to reflect productively on experience. So we were talking yesterday about the Fun Lab and then experiential learning. It's these experiences. What is the difference between people being able to look at a YouTube video on how to do something compared with the experience of working in a team, delivering a project, challenge-based project with a company? That's the value added. So that's what we need to do, and it's all about reflection on those experiences. It's not just about placement opportunities, so it's not just, well, I did a placement, so that was it. Excuse me. It's not just the responsibility of the careers team, so whatever your equivalent is, so ours is employability team, so if you have somebody who's helping students get jobs, it's not their responsibility, it's the academics' responsibility. It's not just relevant to final year students, it should be happening all the way through the degree. It's not just a voluntary extracurriculum option for students, it's got to be embedded in the curriculum. And it's not just relevant to certain courses. Every course needs to think about employability. But it does require a defined and holistic approach to employability that is understood and supported by all staff and made explicit to all students. So if we talk about employability and making it embedded, if it's part of the university strategy, if it's part of either learning outcomes that come down from the top, or each different course or department put those employability learning outcomes in there, then that's important, so that it's embedded in the curriculum. I think it's very important. So this is some research from the Centre for Outcome-Based Learning. That's an interesting think tank, Centre for Outcome-Based Learning. It means employability, the way that people get jobs. So they did some work with the Open University and said students did not generally link study to employability or recognise skills acquired through their study as making a contribution to their employability. So that's interesting. If a Open University is very successful in the UK and a very good learning model, if their students didn't feel as if the things that they were learning was connected to employability, then that's not good. And it would be interesting to know whether our students think that their curriculum is connected to employability. So when asked what the term employability means in terms of their own career prospects, students only linked qualifications and having relevant skills to their desire to improve their career prospects. So a very binary way of thinking about it. It's about qualifications and skills. And so in a way, we might need to educate our own students on the extra nuances that employers are looking for. That they're not just looking for, and we'll have some videos about that, they're not just looking for qualifications, lots of people have qualifications, and they're not just looking at those relevant core skills, it's the other things that they're looking for. And they did not consider the peer-to-peer or student-tutor interaction supported the development of communication skills. So the communication skills, as we know, are very, very, very important. So I've got a few videos now. I hope you're enjoying the videos. At least you don't have to listen to me for some time. So I'm going to just play those videos. And hopefully, first they are, we went and talked to some employers. Oh yeah, let's turn this on. We went to talk to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 employers, different types of employers, and asked them what they were looking for graduates. So 43, 44, 45.
Okay, my name is Lucy Jewson and I'm the Managing Director and Founder of Frugi Organic Children's Wear. Okay, what I like to see in a new graduate that comes to us for a job is I want some innovation, I want some spark, I want lots and lots of fresh ideas that will sort of invigorate the business and invigorate the team around them. I want self-confidence. I want to see people who've had a bit of life experience, not people that have only just thought about academia but are quite well-rounded. For me, when a graduate applies to us for a job, it's not necessarily about CV. I don't expect that a new graduate is going to have a 4-page CV because obviously they've got limited experience. If you can encourage people to go out and have done some interesting internships that really look as though they've done different things in their lives, that will get my attention. It's the self-confidence that is lacking usually in a new graduate coming out. So anything that somebody can do to show a bit of leadership or anything that involves them having to talk to people and be able to demonstrate being out and about and having good people skills is really important. And I think that is lacking in a lot of new graduates. What's really important for me, and the most important thing, is the covering letter. The covering letter needs to be showing that they have done a lot of research on the business and that they give lots of reasons why I couldn't possibly be stupid enough to overlook them. They've got to really think about how their personality, how their skills would fit with our business. And it shouldn't just be a bland CV that is easily overlooked. It's too much competition that way. Just sending the same CV or covering letter out to 50 different companies, you'll go straight in the bin, to be honest. A lot of graduates are coming out with a very academic way of looking at, particularly for us, for fashion and marketing. We're quite a diverse business. We've got marketing, digital marketing, e-commerce, fashion, designing, but all the other jobs as well, like garment technology and production assistants and all of those sorts of things. Most graduates don't know that those positions exist, and most graduates don't know what the skills are that they need to do those jobs. The people that thrive when they join Frugi are people that are really flexible, that don't think, oh, that's not my job description, I'm not going to join in. It's people that see a gap and see problems and come proactively with being ideas to solve them. It's people that lift their head up from behind their screen and involve themselves in other areas of the business.
So I think that was very interesting. So in a way, well, this is a small company, Frugi, who based in Cornwall, and obviously they're trying to deal with the whole, the fashion side, the material, the sourcing, the marketing, the digital marketing. So they're a small to medium enterprise, SME. But everything that she said was everything that Nesta and what we've been talking about was starting to say, okay, it's more about the person. To get my attention even when you apply, know something about our company and put that into the cover letter. We expect you to have the creative degree, but actually that's not the most important thing, because there are all these jobs here the students don't even know about, that if you could adapt to those jobs and lift your head up from the screen and be outgoing and problem solving and teamwork based and bright, and that would help us. So I think, how do you teach that as part of a curriculum? Because 100% of what she was talking about was nothing to do with discipline specific. So that's, I think, really interesting. So that's an employer who's looking for a graduate who says, yeah, we don't expect you to have 4 pages of CV because you're a graduate. But what we do expect you to have already done some things which are about experience, about leadership, about just prove to us, get something that looks, that jumps off the page that says you are the type of bright teamwork, problem-solving, leadery kind of person that we're looking for. And I think that's what we need to be looking at for employability. So it's a big ask, but that's what we need to develop and how we need to develop it. So let's have a look at another one.
We need our graduates to write well, and so I do look to see if they've done English to a reasonable grade and are quite numerate, really, because all those things are skills that you need to work as an interior designer, really. I think all students come with a great way of demonstrating their creativity. Some people don't necessarily support that with the technical backup, which we would look for, whether that's kind of written research or whether that's detailing or sort of technical drawings. I think some of the best courses do one project in their final year where they see a project all the way through from conception to completion in a hypothetical way, and that's quite a good way of seeing how a student has developed their design through the whole process of design. Quite often you just see portfolios which are just all conceptual work, which are great because they show the creativity of that student, but they don't show much more, and we need to sort of home in underneath that to see if there's a bit more knowledge or a bit more depth to their approach to design. A lot of people that we interview, especially graduates, are very shy, and they're not used to having to talk through their portfolio on a one-to-one basis or in 2 groups. I'm sure they've had to stand up and do crits. But I think more confidence in doing that. Often young designers get frustrated by the length of time it takes in seeing their concepts materialise and the process that they have to go through to do that. And I think that's a real eye-opener for them. And, they come and they say, I wish it was more creative around here. They don't realise that it will take a year and a half for them to build out what they've designed and the processes that you have to go through to do that. I think also to understand that there is a creative process during that period, and it may not just be doing the concept design, but there's creativity in detailing something up, persuading the clients to spend extra money on your material, your design. There's a whole kind of linear process, and that still can be creative if you're positive about it and make the most of it.
So this person who runs an interior design studio had a different, so she was very focused on the skills and said, yeah, we need the skills, and actually we need more than just the conceptualization we often get in a portfolio. So it's very good to see one project all the way through, so we know they've got the full rounded approach. And also that students sometimes get a little bit upset that it's not creative, bang, creative every day. So you have to find creative ways within a longer process of a year and a half to deliver a product, and find creativity within that, which is another thing. Sometimes at university, it's a project for 2 weeks, a project for 4 weeks, they already get a product at the end of it, then move on to the next one. And in industry, you might be juggling 5 or 6 projects, and each one of them take a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to materialise. So I think that's also a very interesting perspective from an employer's point of view. Is this okay? Yeah?
So aside from a really strong portfolio, one of the main things we look for is personality of the new graduate or artist that we take on, because it's really important to us that an artist is really easy to work with. You know, for us, it's our reputation as well as theirs. So when they're working with clients, they've got to be really flexible, just really easy to get along with, and yeah, just be enthusiastic as well. That's like something that we really look for. So it's really important that they're committed to producing lots of new work, that they're really driven. So that's kind of something that we look for, as well as obviously a really strong portfolio. One of the gaps that we see is kind of linked to what I was saying before about what we look for. So we do tend to find that a lot of new graduates, once they leave, they tend to think, oh, I've done that now, like I've done my course and kind of I can sit back and it'll all come to me kind of thing, and they're not really proactive. So that's definitely a gap, especially when they get an agent. I think they think, oh, the agent is going to do it all for me now, so I don't need to do anything. When actually it's the time that they need to be doing the most work. Even if you've got an agent, you need to be producing work so that they've got something to take out to show new clients, and they need to be generating new work all the time. The kind of understanding of how long it takes to build up a successful career, I think a lot of new graduates think that it will kind of very quickly happen, and especially in our industry it can take years to develop. But we do look at CVs, and something that we always kind of think is a really good skill is when people have kind of like customer experience or things like that, so that they're used to interacting with people.
Yeah, and she was talking as well, wasn't she, about it not being instantaneous, that, you know, it does take a long time, and students finish university and then think, okay, employers come and find me, and actually that's when the work starts. And, you know, we have this term, I'm sure you have as well, portfolio career, you know, so that you're developing a career and it might have lots of different bits to it, so you can go in lots of different, but that takes time and takes quite a lot of work. We are having to introduce that term from the first year with students, saying, well, it could be that you have a portfolio career, and that could be that you're in a creative cluster of recent graduates, you know, you're developing, working together on teams with some projects individually. You then go off and do a project completely outside your own area, and the portfolio career is the thing that you develop in. So I think we need to change students' perceptions of what happens when you graduate. It's not just you finish. In some areas it might be that you get the great job and then you continue. For instance, our graphics area, and they might talk about it in a while, they create these of 3-week internships with lots of different companies. And so they'll go from one 3-week to another 3-week to another 3-week. Usually by the second or third one, they've got a job. So it's a way that employers are testing students to see whether they like them, whether they fit in, whether they're the type of students. So there's lots of ways that employers are now using internship and smaller internships to test it out and see whether they want those students. So all the different disciplines need to look at those different methods and what's the best one for them. Let's have a look at another one.
For me, when I view a portfolio, obviously the place of work's really important, but it's definitely like a 50-50 split for me between creativity, talent, and personality and attitude, really. So attitude is easy to work with, they need to be kind of flexible and open-minded, I think. No arrogance or big-headedness, you know. Confidence is good, you know, that's fine. Opinion is good, like, as long as there's backup. You know, I think some of the best designers are really opinionated, and that's great. But also to be able to sort of have a thick skin and just kind of take on sometimes some negative feedback, whether that's from someone more senior than you or junior or whatever, but, you know, and obviously from clients as well. Like, number one is, can they design their own CVs? I've plenty of CVs that look terrible that are in Word in Times New Roman 12 point, and you're just like, well, you can't design your own CV, then what else? You know, you can't design, as far as I can say. So making sure that's good, but also just, you know, I quite often skip to look at not the design stuff on their CV, but actually like their grades at A-level and things like that. I like to see people that maybe like great at English or maths or science or something else other than design, because for me that just shows that they've got a really kind of clever brain, and, you know, we want bright people working for us, and also outside interests. I've found that the best designers aren't the ones that are just obsessed with design 24/7. They've actually got other interests, whether that's kind of music or some weird science podcast, whatever. Just they kind of look out beyond just the kind of obvious. But the gaps, I think, probably again back to that time management thing, just understanding the pressures of time management and understanding how to deliver things on time and on budget and all that kind of stuff, because I guess they've never had to deal with the fact that if that doesn't get done within that kind of time frame, then it's going to start to cost the company money, and, you know, that's a kind of different way of playing things. And also client relationships, and just understanding that, you know, the client isn't evil, like we're working with clients and not for them. You know, we try to collaborate with them and involve them and all those things. And I think, I don't know, I think there's a myth within design that the client is going to crush everything and, you know, bring out all the creativity and just, you know, end up with something really bland. And it doesn't have to be like that. You know, I think there's a little bit of kind of education process and kind of working together that is maybe not known from a graduate point of view. I think the other thing is to not get too hung up on the kind of technology side of things. I think it's great that designers are coming out being able to use the software, and some of them are like, you know the software better than I do. But I'm not worried about that. I'm really worried about thinkers. I'm worried about bright people with great ideas, unusual ideas, you know, people that kind of think in a different way to me or have some different skills or whatever. You know, I think those are the really important things. I think there's tons of courses churning out people that are amazing in Photoshop. But if they haven't got a brain behind it, if there's not an idea behind that stuff, if they can't kind of take a brief and solve it, then, you know, they're not really going to last, or they're not going to work in the great places that you want to.
So that was another really interesting one as well. So he was saying, wasn't he, that he looks down the CV and then he goes past the design stuff and says, what are their other interests? What were their A-level results? Are they a wider person? He wants people who are looking more than just design. Universities are churning out technically proficient people, so he needs somebody who's a thinker and a visionary so those are really interesting comments, I think, and very interesting as far as the kind of graduate that we want. And also that the technology is not the most important thing, it's about bringing a wider aspect to things. So let me just check which 46 and 42.
The sector has changed for us as a business because we can just see this growth and enthusiasm of people who are willing to work together and get more involved. They're getting rid of that whole competitive attitude of, oh no, you're a web designer, you stay over there, I'm a web designer as well. It's more of a, actually, what you're doing is really cool, let's see if we can work together and actually enhance both of our offerings. And so that's what we're finding more of, which is really good. So there's lots to look forward to, but it's just being able to be adaptable and stay ahead of the curve every time. If you're a new graduate and you're looking to come into this industry, it's all about being adaptive, understanding human behaviour, understanding what they want and need, and understanding what business needs, with the increase of technology, so like Skype and Slack, team building and teamwork is also very important as well. So being able to work in teams that could potentially be all the way across the world. And so, yeah, being able to adapt to that mindset is very important. But yeah, it's just being able to show us that they've got that edge over everyone else. Because if everyone else is coming off the same course as you, producing similar work, where do you stand out from all these people? So if you can say, actually, I did this like project with this client, or I worked with these people, then yeah, it lends a bit more, it puts a bit more onto the table for us to look at. And so I feel that in higher education, there needs to be an overlap, or I feel there needs to be more of an overlap between multidisciplinary. So you've got the business side, so people who are doing business studies, and you've got people who are on the digital courses. If there was a way of merging those together to not just to support each other, because you've got these people who are wanting to start businesses but they don't have the technical capabilities, so they can work together in that sense. But also you've got people from the technical side of digital courses who know how to build cool things, but they have no idea how to monetize it, manage it, how to actually turn it into a business. So this is where they could go over to the other side and say, okay, great, well, let's see if we can make this work. There's also the side on the tech clusters where people are starting to become more aware of the businesses that are popping up around them. So you've got great organisations like Software Cornwall, you've got Digital Exeter, and you've got Digital Plymouth as well, who are creating these communities, and they're trying to promote and connect like-minded people. So not just people who are in the tech industry, but business people as well, students, teachers, anyone who has a passion for digital, creating new things and ideas. So last year when we took on placement students, we had a few interviews, which was great for us, and they all had really good CVs. They were third-year students, and the CVs were really well formatted, really well structured. They had portfolio websites that demonstrated their programming and design abilities, and it was all really good, and we liked that way. But a lot of it came down to personality and passion, and how they actually wanted to work with you, and where they saw themselves in the next few years. Because that gave us some insight into them as a person. And for businesses, that's a much better thing to get, rather than just seeing that they've got a degree and that they scored this on these modules. It's not just about that, it's about what experience that they've had in the past.
Okay, so let's carry on. So I think similarly, he was talking about teamwork, wasn't he, and about there's lots of people who come out with the same qualifications, in a way, very similar portfolio. So what's the edge? And the edge is, a passion and a drive and experiences that will help them stand out from the crowd. So I guess that's difficult. That's difficult for universities, in that we do need to help students have that edge, and that's the big thing. So how do we do that? And I'm sure that the curriculum, I've already heard that the curriculum's trying to develop the self more, and confidence and different approaches to things, so you're looking at lots of different aspects. But I think we need to be doing that from day one, so that students are very rounded. They can look at a problem from lots of different angles and focuses and lenses, and it'll just give them that edge. Plus, how do we give them the experiences that will make sure that when they do have that CV or that first interview, that those are the experiences that mean that they're standing out from the crowd. Okay, so I'm going to look to finish this off and then have a break, so don't worry, I'm not going to talk for hours and hours and hours. But it'd be good to finish this one off and then continue. So you need to be driven and ambitious, Being personable and professional is key. Resilience is key. You get a lot of knockbacks. Being able to network, how to connect and communicate, where to even look for work, the self-confidence to talk to anyone, learning to juggle work, life and my career within the performing arts. You need to be flexible, adapt yourself well, and not just get stuck doing one thing. So again, all of these comments are about your approach, your attitude, your behaviour, your aptitude, more than the graphic designer that you expected to be, or the tool you expected to work with. So more graduate views, being able to present to clients and understand their needs and brief, being able to stand your own ground and stand by what you know to be right, have confidence in your working abilities, negotiating estimates, fees, etc., pricing and negotiating usage, contracts, terms and conditions. We're not prepared for this. Managing money, keeping up to date with tax-related bookkeeping, sorting contracts, sending out sold items from my online shop. Again, things that they don't feel they get in from their courses. So graduate views, the biggest challenge for me is how much of a mental roller coaster self-employment is. I go from months of being rushed off my feet to having nothing to do. I didn't expect it to feel as hard as it does. Really feel for that graduate. I wasn't prepared for how volatile the industry I have chosen to work in is. Everything happens overnight, and I wasn't prepared for how out of control I would feel at first. Very interesting. So, another video.
I began working on illustration commissions.
So these are two graduates, or a set of graduates, and you'll see a different perspective, so it's much more immature, but again it's interesting.
Third year of uni, or second year of uni, and working with clients and newspapers and magazines. The illustration course at Falmouth was really practical, and I really benefited from that. It helped you approach the industry, it helped you make contacts, and the tutors were really good at knowing people in the industry and kind of setting you up with meetings and encouraging you to meet people in London and to go on trips to New York, and that general kind of having confidence in you can make a living from this, and telling you very practically how to make a living from it. I mean, we had bookkeeping presentations and how to do tax returns and all this kind of stuff, which was really practical.
It would have been great maybe to have learned a bit more about basic communication with clients and things like you can get a brief sometimes which won't fully explain all the things you're going to have to do, and it can go back and forth a few times, but being able to know exactly what information you need when you first start a project and to ask for that information straight up.
The illustration sector has developed through technology and through the use of social media. There's a real emphasis of putting your work out into the world, and there's an immediate public reception of a picture. It's no longer waiting for someone to see your piece in a magazine.
Beyond technical skills, I'd say client communication, which I think is something you pick up through tutorials and having one-to-ones with tutors. They ask you to treat them like a client, and you go through from your concept idea to your complete uni piece, and it's kind of similar to what we do at work. I think everything was pretty much covered skill-wise at university over the 3 years. We did some live projects which were really helpful. It's about being in an environment which is supportive, and when you do make those early mistakes, you're guided in the right direction, you know where you've gone wrong, and it's all really clear cut. The industry that I'm in, I think, is incredibly competitive, especially for graduates. I think getting a graduate job isn't easy. It's my first 6 months I was doing a work placement which I really enjoyed and got loads of experience from, but wasn't something that, wasn't the kind of environment I wanted to be in. So I think realising that, as long as you're doing something along the same lines as what you want to do, it doesn't define you, and I'm now in a job that I really, really enjoy and is much more suited to me.
I think students should know that when they go into industry and they want to have a job at this place that they're maybe interning at or testing out, they need to have an attitude that is, I can do anything. If somebody asks me how to do something, I will work out how to do it. And you enjoy that problem solving sort of side of things. And everyone says kind of problem solving is a thing, and it becomes a bit cliche, but actually having that attitude to being able to do anything, working something out for any reason, is incredibly important. I got a placement in my second year at uni. I think having it in academic time isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you're in the thick of it, like you're working on this brief, I've just had this in, been talking to my tutors about it, sweet, right, I'm going to work in the industry for a bit, I'm doing this, go back in, it's like, oh, I've learned this over the last 2 weeks, now I'm going to do this for this project I've been working on, and suddenly it adds so much more value to your work, and it really, you've learned so much from that process that you can take that back in straight away almost. Sometimes, say you have an internship over the beginning of summer, and you've got 3-4 weeks off, and then you're like, right, back to uni. Sometimes that's a bit too long. I think it's really good bringing business into the course at an early stage, because it inspires you straight from the off. Also, learning about that as you go along inspires the work you do at uni, which in turn defines where you'll probably get a job at the end of it. So the whole time you're kind of adapting, you're changing what you're doing at uni, and that informs your final portfolio. The best thing that prepared me for working life was the studio environment, being able to treat it as kind of my own place to work. And the best thing about the studio, its open plan nature, means that it's quite reflective of how industry it is, and you feel at home and comfortable working in the environment that you create for yourself, which that allows.
Very excitable young man there, so that's good, he's happy. So I think that's quite interesting when the students are talking about their recent experience of what they had, and quite a few of them talk about business. You know, they would like it. The earlier illustration students said that they did get some bookkeeping courses and how you set up a small business and that, which is good, but that's at Falmouth was very much the course deciding to do that, and we have to, as a university, find a way of working, getting those core entrepreneurial skills to the students without putting them off the business. So I think that's a balancing act that we need to do. Okay, I'll just carry on with this now. So I mentioned yesterday the destination of leavers in higher education data, so Delhi, and it's quite interesting that part of that questions, part of that auditing says how well did the students' HE experience prepare them for employment. So our own said very well, 68.3%. Not very well, not at all, 20%, can't tell, 10%. And then how well did it set them up for self-employment? 60%, 24%, not very well, can't tell, 12%. So that's not great, I don't think, if 30% of students generally are coming out saying it wasn't very well prepared, or I can't tell whether it was there. So that's something I think we have to improve. So graduate feedback, I only really saw the option of becoming a creative as that's what our course was tailoring us for. I think more exposure to other industries would have been good, as you really can apply the skills you learn to many sectors, we know that. I did not know that the job I am in now existed. I think that's a very telling statement. It probably didn't exist, and actually the jobs that our students are going to go into probably don't exist at this moment. It was not until I left university that I found out about my current job role, which directly links to my degree studies. So are we, as academics, really clear about all the jobs that relate to our industry? The textiles person, the fashion textiles person in the very first video said, students coming out, they don't even understand all the jobs that are in this small to medium sized enterprise. So how does that work? Are we just saying fashion design, runway, catwalk, and then you go out to be a top fashion designer? Whereas there's 1,000 jobs within that pursuit, so that's important. The amount of times you'll get knocked down, how to deal with your mental health in these situations. I think learning to deal with stress and well-being will be great ambition on the course. What we spoke about yesterday about resilience, and do we need to offer resilience training to academics, but also resilience training to students. It was instilled in us that networking was pretty essential, but how to actually go about doing this, events, LinkedIn, etc., was not taught. Sometimes we think that because students are young often, they know how to use all the digital tools, when in fact they might need to be taught. We were working alongside our studies, which was the only way we could have started straight out of Falmouth. We would often be told that we couldn't use our professional work in our assessments. Why? We had very little understanding of developing a business and what that would functionally look like. I guess we had a lot of dreams and ideas at Falmouth, and trying to make those a reality has been harder than expected. Okay.
I think that what made our course so successful in terms of so many people being employed afterwards was that we all got special attention. The tutors really understood each of our different interests, and I think really pushed me to do what I was more interested in. Yeah, our technicians were amazing, and I definitely think if student numbers are going to increase, I think that's what English needs to increase as well, because I mean all of my technical skills I learned from one guy, and without him I would be clueless.
So I can only talk about my own experience in higher education, and I think one of the things that Falmouth does really well is the fact that it's got literally hundreds of different disciplines and courses. That's great, that's super great. The integration between those courses is, unless you live with them, or you know them, or you've been drinking with them, or whatever else, you probably won't be running into them, which is kind of interesting. I think that's kind of the wrong way to be going. To be honest, you should be setting briefs between illustration, photography and advertising, come up with something, enter it into an award, see what other people are doing. Or whether it's, you've got textile designers, can you get an advertising student with a textile designer and go, here's a problem, solve it. You've got two different disciplines, put it together, see what happens. I think as soon as you start doing that, you're playing in a really interesting sort of area. One really important thing is breadth and knowledge of past work from different disciplines. So whether it's photography, whether it's illustration, whether it's even writing.
I think now you're expected to work on many levels and quite quickly, and I think it does put pressure on on young interior designers, and I don't think actually the colleges are doing an awful lot of work to prepare them for that. I think they're still, you go back to some of the courses and they're not dissimilar to where I was 25 years ago in the way they teach, and I think they don't reflect how quickly clients want things and how quickly you have to turn information around. I think we're slightly different here because we always give permanent PAYE jobs out. We don't take people on contracts, but I think that's quite unusual. I think the industry norm is for quite short contracts, and I think that will happen more and more going forward, that people will work almost more self-employed. And also, even in this practice, you can work from home, I can go and work in Manchester. Everything's becoming more fluid.
I think the uni should definitely promote collaboration a wee bit more. But I think collaboration is so important. We did the set design for Grease the Musical, and you get all these sort of different opinions and views kind of feeding in and informing your judgment, which is actually really reflected in real life. And clients But working on that made my portfolio stand out to a lot of studios.
I think that those changes of being much more connected to the customer have affected every job in the business now. So any graduate that comes in will be at some point talking to the end consumer. People involved with higher education and that are involved in producing the new talent for us need to get out and about into industry themselves a lot more, and to also think that there aren't that you've got to go to London or you've got to go to some amazing European city with the centre of fashion, for example, to find innovation. Actually, we've got loads of innovation happening here in Cornwall. We've got amazing fashion brands. We've got Finisterre, Cecil, us, there's loads of stuff going on. We're all doing amazing things with digital marketing. We're all doing all of these exciting things. And I think that the university needs to get out and about, the course leaders need to get out and about and see what is needed at a grassroots level so that they can better prepare their students. And that, I can tell you, is not happening enough. I think my advice to a new graduate now would be go that you can live. Go travelling. It teaches you huge self-confidence, it teaches you great resilience since they need to go off and get jobs, part-time jobs. They're all relevant when you go into a workplace. Academia is definitely not the be-all and end-all, and whether you get a first or a 2-1 or a 2-2 is not actually that important. It's about how innovative you are, it's about how you stand out from the crowd, so make sure you do.
So I think what was interesting there was the person who said, I look at lots of courses and they're teaching it exactly the same as when I was a student 25 years ago. And I think that's an important litmus test, because surely we should be teaching things in a different way, with a different customer, with different challenges. And the other thing I think was very interesting is lecturers, academics should get out and about and make sure that they are talking, working with, collaborating with industry, because otherwise we'll just be seen more and more as an isolated sector who is more and more out of connection with the industry and less important, and that can happen. So that's an interesting part. Okay, so I'll just finish this off and then we can have a break.
It's not
Yes.
like a query. Like here we are talking about the currently, earlier we were just concentrating on our core inputs and we were strengthening their technical knowledge, their professional requirement, and we are trying to imbibe those very with them. But now we are also looking at the softer part, so that they may not be only academically very highly placed or knowledgeable, but also they need to have a good worldview. And you to understand why things are happening and the way things are happening. But while we were doing our curriculum here recently, many people have said that because of this entire shift, the emphasis on core knowledge which is required for that specific course, we are reducing drastically. Like earlier, let's take an example for drawing, which we teach in the foundation program. So earlier people were doing a lot of practice to get the skill of it. How to actually do that to improve your ideation and then presentation. Now that has drastically reduced, because when we are talking about that more modes are incorporated, there are other ways of doing, improving your ideation and representation. What is your view of this? That how, because it's such a, we don't know the result as of now.
Yeah.
We'll see that. But there's a lot of on a daily basis the kind of enforcement we were doing to ensure that the certain things they are aware of it. That slightly has reduced. But I think somewhere from a methodology point of view, maybe we are doing the same thing, but we are doing it we will be doing it differently.
Yeah.
That is what I think our aim is. But
Yeah.
what is your view?
So I think with 25 hours a week you're still doing a lot, so you'll be okay. I remember when I was first working at the Technical University in Eindhoven, so I'll talk about this tomorrow, but it was really a collision between engineers and designers, with Philips as the major client, and the engineers said, you need 4 days of mathematics, and then 1 day of something else, but 4 days of mathematics, you cannot do less. And then the designers would say, you need 4 days of drawing, you cannot have a day less. And actually, I'm from fine art area, so I could look at both and go, well, it's not going to happen. So we're going to create a curriculum. And they said, both sides said, you'll end up with bank managers. Because they'll be generalists. They'll be generalists. But actually, not at all. So those students, because they've got the vocabulary of the engineer, the vocabulary of the designer, they become bridging people. And they actually, it doesn't matter, they can draw well enough, they've got enough mathematics well enough, the competency is really low with some and really high with others, doesn't matter. But what's really important is that they bridge between the two, and they like gold dust. So I think that doesn't answer it, but we were recently at MIT, and we said, yeah, okay, so we're developing this multidisciplinary, but obviously we have to take some time away from the core. And he said, listen, what we think is, it used to be, you used to know a lot about a little, so that was the model. Now, we just think the students need to know a little about a lot. And that's more important than knowing a lot about a little. And it goes back to what the students have been talking about, but also what the employers were talking about, is that, yeah, drawing is important, the technical things are important, but not the most important. So if we're spending 99% of our time on that, and not on the other things that we used to call the softer skills, they won't get the jobs, and we won't be working with industry in that way. So I would say at 25 hours you'll still be doing a lot of drawing, but it's not the most important thing. And you might actually want to say that the drawing is not drawing as a skill, but drawing as a storytelling. And when it becomes storytelling, drawing's only one small part between video, digital technology, and all of these other things. So it goes back to that comment the interior designer made, make sure we've not got the same curriculum that you did. So if I look at my fine art course at Falmouth, it's the same curriculum when I was a student doing fine art. That's not good. It's got to change. So, but very good point. Because that's always the thing, the balance between core and general. We need to think of a new word for the general, because as we see, and as we know from all of the research that's happening with employers and what big employers are wanting, it's not the core stuff. They get 1,000 graduates a day writing to them, and that's not what they want. And fashion, for instance, there's so many fashion designers, they can't get a job in fashion design, so what is it we've got to give them? I'll just finish this. So, classic employability skills. So the HEA said the classic ones are personal qualities, core skills, process skills. Personal qualities are awareness of strengths and weaknesses, self-confidence, dealing with challenges, independence, adaptability, initiative, emotional intelligence, stress, tolerance, willingness to learn, being reflective. The core skills are reading, effectiveness, numeracy, data retrieval, language skills, written and oral communication skills, listening skills, critical analysis, presentation skills, creativity, global awareness. And the process skills are computer literacy, commercial awareness, political and ethical sensitivity, the ability to work cross-culturally, the ability to prioritize, plan and problem solve, the ability to justify, negotiate and influence, the ability to work in teams. So these things, they're not soft, are they? These are hardcore skills that we want our students to have. So the best way of doing it, is another answer, is create challenge-based projects that bring all of this into them, and then you solve two things. There's an English phrase which is horrible, you kill two birds with one stone. So the career development framework from the DOTS model is self-awareness, the ability to identify and articulate motivation, skills and personality as they affect career plans. Opportunity awareness, knowledge of opportunities and the ability to research these. Decision making, being able to weigh up personal factors to make a sound plan. And transitional learning, understanding of how to seek and secure opportunities. So, embedding employability skills and behaviours, how do we do it? Well, at the moment we do it through, and this is what we're talking about, live briefs, community-based projects, study trips, industry-led workshops and challenges, visiting speaker programs, specific employability module sessions, placement, Erasmus and study abroad. So, the creative attributes framework, embedding enterprise and employability, attributes that support and make things happen, support showcasing abilities and accomplishments, and support life-wide learning. So this creative attributes framework attributes the support making things happen. So this comes from, sorry I missed it off, but this comes from UAL, University of Arts London, and you know this already, probably. So they've developed a creative attributes framework. So these are the skills that they think you need to be a creative. It's very interesting. So it's embedding employabilities, the things that I've already said. It's attributes that make things happen. Proactivity, enterprise, and agility. So they're saying we want all of our students to have these things. Showcasing abilities and accomplishment, how you put yourself out in the world. Connectivity, communication, and storytelling. And it's quite interesting when you look at communication and storytelling as two different things. And then support life-wide learning. Curiosity, self-efficacy, which is a terrible word, I still don't know what it means. I don't know how a student's going to know what that means, and resilience. So I think that's quite interesting. You can get those online as well, the UAL Creative Attributes Framework, and obviously you'll get this as well. But I think that's quite interesting. They are assessing their students and their courses against that framework, and I think that's quite interesting. The Open University have a checklist for course teams. So they audit your course to map the learning outcomes to employability skills and develop an employability skills profile. It's quite interesting. Explain to your students how the learning outcomes of your course are linked to employability. And they also say be explicit about employability skills in the course description and module guides of your course. They also say, explain to students where assessment activities can be used to demonstrate employability skills and draw attention to employability qualities that your course develops. So this is some universities who are doing some good practice. I'm just going to finish now with a few examples from some lecturers at Falmouth who are doing things that we consider to be quite good beginnings of employability and embedding employability. So let's have a look. Do this after the break. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm a hard task driver. So if we have a 10-minute break then, and we'll be back at, well, let's do a 7-minute one, we'll be back at 30:30. Is that okay? Or 10 minutes? No, 10 minutes. Be back at 33 minutes past then, yeah? The good practice amongst the tutors, and then that's the employability finish. Actually, the blended learning side is a little bit shorter, so that's fine. And I'd like to get that finished by 12:30 so that we've finished another block. Just to say what we're doing tomorrow then is we're going to do the really exciting stuff. So we're going to have a look at the 2030 strategy. We're going to look at some longer videos. So we recently invited some people to come and help us with our 2030 strategy. We also had some faculty did small 10-minute videos as well, or 10-minute presentations as well. So we'll use a couple of those. And also I'd like to have a look at our curriculum development and some of those models as well. So that's what we'll be doing over the next 2.5 days, or 3 hours and 1.5 hours. So hopefully then we'll have delivered the core stuff, which is, you know, the things that we think are important, but then we'll be looking ahead into the future and what that will be. Good? So I'm going to just play some videos now very quickly, and let's have a look. I'll just go down the list. These are not all of them, it's down to this one. So and they're all about 4 minutes, so not that long. So I'll start here.
We introduced a mentoring scheme to try and get students to engage with industry at a much earlier stage than they perhaps would normally do towards the end of their degree. The course was fairly new and we didn't have a big, large amount of contacts to help with being able to place students in placements for the summer holidays, etc. So we came up with the idea of trying to get students to find their own mentors within industry. And so we supported this by creating a system which actually had 10 credits associated with it, so it's a compulsory unit. And the students have to identify a practitioner or an area where they're interested in, contact that practitioner via email. We vet the emails, we don't just let them loose on industry. They've also got to put an online portfolio on so that they can refer to that with their mentors. We do it in level 2, second year, because by that time they're aware of the industry, they've got some work in their portfolio, and I think they're generally more confident to actually start to talk to people outside in the big wide world. We assess it in several ways. They have to, it's done in the first semester, in the first study block of level 2, and we introduce it by explaining how industry works in terms of placements, job finding, careers, and actually it's the initial contact which is so important. That then comes in for assessment at the end of the study block, so it gains 10 credits. As I say, it's compulsory, but we monitor it through that first semester and we talk with the various students, you know, who they've been contacting. We have a list of contacts, and actually what's interesting now is we have 5 years of graduating cohorts. The graduates are really quite keen to be mentors. They've been through the process, they're working in some top agencies, and they're actually contacting us to become mentors, which is really good. The scheme is only assessed up until the first study block. We then encourage students to engage with their mentors. We don't really check after that. We do keep referring to, have you got a mentor? They tend to, they're able to supply lots of information for students. So we keep on at them even if they haven't got a mentor in the first semester study block. I think in terms of employability, it's quite good in that we try and get the students to be very crafty. So we will get into contact their mentor and then suggest they might be in the area over Christmas, can they pop in and see them? So it's definitely by stealth, it's definitely building a relationship by stealth, and then when that starts, it can lead to placements over the summer. It's definitely about getting into the network. For us, it's essential that you're into this employment network.
So that was quite an interesting initiative at the university, that this idea that interior design students find a mentor, there's credit connected to it, and also it helps the network of the student, gets them into the network. And also what's really interesting is that recent graduates over a certain amount of years want to be mentors to students. They're already working in really good jobs and agencies, and they want to become mentors, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's quite an interesting approach from an employability point of view.
The study trip in the third year is, in a way, the culmination of the professional practice component of the course. Students initiate that kind of project by researching clients that really connect with their chosen direction in terms of their work. And they start to make contact directly. They're speaking directly with art directors at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the New Yorker, brokering basically appointments for small groups to go out with their professional practice portfolios, their actual illustration portfolios, to go out and get feedback. we get the students to work in groups, special interest groups, to really help support each other in this event. So they're collaborating and making decisions as teams in terms of how they administer those particular components of the visit. So some will be researching, finding the contacts, some will be making the appointments. So there's a kind of a really significant transferable skill in terms of management and project management taking place. Each industry visit that they make in New York or London or Vancouver or wherever will generate a professional practice report, and that will then be factored into the final module mark, and it will be weighted at 20%. So 80% is the actual illustration work they produce, 20% is this portfolio of professional practice. Occasionally, a particular student that we find going on a particular visit may not be as appropriate for that visit, and so it may have to require us to intervene a little bit and say, well, maybe this isn't quite the most appropriate client. So that is, in a way, protecting the student, but it's also protecting the reputation of the course and making sure that the right students are going to the right visits. It provides them with a springboard. They know that when they come on the course, even before they come on the course, because it's well presented in our marketing. It's kind of pushed through our marketing. And we deliver on that, and they know that that's going to kind of be a springboard for their career. It's not compulsory. You can do this work based in Cornwall. You can get that feedback from some of the great design groups in Cornwall and in the southwest. So it doesn't have to happen, but most people see it as an opportunity to really test themselves in the most challenging of environments, New York. But there have been a number of commissions that have come directly from appointments with various children's book publishers and publishers, and also, of course, a number of commissions that have come from the Wall Street Journal in particular, but the New York Times. But the wider story is really about the deep knowledge that all of them get that fuels the first 6 months of their career. Having clients in New York aware of the illustration course in Falmouth is a fantastic thing in terms of our marketing, in terms of our wider international reach, because we do see ourselves on an international level rather than just a national level. We kind of want to push our reputation outwardly. So the advice to any other courses, and other courses do take students abroad, and it's great, but it has to be planned well in advance. You've got to get a tour operator on board working with you really early before the academic year starts to get an expression of interest from students that might be interested, to start to get a sense of the figures, the numbers. And this is a significant investment on the student's part, so it needs to be taken seriously, and then you have to start to work on it and assign somebody within your team to really dedicate themselves to being the lead on that particular project.
And very often it's that moment when they turn the corner, actually when they realise it's actually about them, it's actually about what they want and not what everyone else wants. Therefore, what we try to do through the transitions module is empower the student to kind of take control of what their direction could be. And so therefore that's really important. You start to see that at the higher end, probably 2-1 above, where the student really starts to take control, and you can see them actually making independent decisions about what they want to do for their future. In terms of the physical deliverables for transitions, there is obviously the areas that you would expect: the portfolio, the website, the CVs. There's the kind of broader collection of reflective work that looks at studios, that looks at experiences that have run through the course, that looks at projects they've perhaps done that also they've really enjoyed, and they can bring those into the portfolio. But that kind of secondary part forms a kind of report. At the very minimum, that report can be a kind of document, it can be a kind of a film. And that's generally what happens with the students at the higher end. They kind of might produce a newspaper. They might produce something that is not only useful to them for the purpose of the module, but actually becomes a useful piece of information in its own right. And that's what we saw certainly with a student from a couple of years ago who'd won a number of awards, international awards. She put an incredible film together, and that was used on her site to kind of tell people what her journey was. It was kind of really celebrating, actually, the role that her learning had taken in getting her to that point, and that was really lovely, not only for her, not only for us, but also for creative directors looking at it and thinking, God, she had a great time, didn't she? Wouldn't it be great if I could do that? Which is lovely too.
So that's a really successful transitions module, and again, I think that picking of learning moments, putting it together, and it becoming your portfolio that you go out to the world with, beyond just a very standard CV and a very standard final project. And I think that gathering it together, this is how I'm going to go out into the world, and now I understand more the direction I want to go, becomes very important. So that's another interesting way of looking at ways of doing that.
Across creative events management and music, theatre and entertainment management, we have shared placement modules. There are 2 in the first year and there's 1 in the third year. And we encourage students to take placements and to volunteer for activities between those modules as well. So we encourage it in the second year as well, which is to assess it. In terms of the value to students, we think that our approach gives them multiple opportunities to take short, bespoke placements. They can build their experience and grow their networks quite quickly. The first placement that we encourage students to take is in week 7. So we clear that week of teaching for them and have an official subject area placement week. Sometimes students struggle to apply for their own placements, particularly in the first instance. Again, we have support that helps them with that, but equally we provide opportunities for them, so that mitigates that a little bit. Even during Freshers Week, we start inducting them into activities on the public programme. So they're very quickly getting hands-on learning by doing opportunities, and that really supports them when they get to the point of 6-7 weeks in taking a placement. And we've got multiple examples of students sort of going through the system, the 3 years of micro placements, and then walking into a job at the end, which has been either with an organisation they've held a placement with, for instance the Eden Project is one example, or closely linked to organisations that they've held placements in. And that brings me on to the way that we assess them. So in the first year, the first module, Study Block 1, they reflect on their experiences within the placement in a written piece of work. Study Block 2 for the first year, they reflect on the management practice of the person that was managing them at the placement. By the time they come to their third year, in the first study block, within that, they're expected to do a case study of the placement that they've carried out, and they're also expected to develop a portfolio. So they're developing a portfolio, which means that they can start to apply for jobs. And by doing it in the first study block, we're just giving them that extra ammunition a bit quicker. And we think that priming those placement opportunities, running them throughout the course, ensuring that they develop their portfolio early, having regular engagement with colleagues from careers just really supports the students to get them ready to be out the door really quick, getting jobs. I can understand why people don't do it, because particularly if you've got a large cohort of students, if you insist that people are assessed on a placement, you then have to make sure that all of those students get a placement, and that therein lies the challenge. So overall, I would recommend to colleagues that they consider including micro placements in their curricular development over time. I think it's really beneficial for students in a variety of ways, clearly linking to their employability. And from the course's point of view, it also helps us to build relationships with industry partners. It's a great bridge for us into industry, it's a great bridge for the students into industry. It's kind of a win-win.
So what's interesting there, the creative events management, so it's all about events and how to be creative around that, and it's quite interesting that they do these micro placements, which is, I think, is a very good idea, from the 7th week in of the course. So the first year, 7 weeks in, you're expected to do a micro placement, and the way that they reflect on it is different as it grows. So the first one is how they did on their placement, second is The second one that they do is how the people who manage them did with their placement. The third one is a full case study of the placement and what went well and what went badly, which becomes part of the portfolio. So I think that's an interesting way as well, is sometimes we have this idea that placement should be 7 weeks long, it should be extracurricular, and they built it into the curriculum and made these micro placements, which I think is quite interesting. I don't know what.
When you say 7th week, that means 7th week after they join the program.
Yes.
So what is expected?
Yeah, so the expectation is that it's connected to industry and they need to get a placement. It's micro, so it's 1 or 2 weeks, but it's just, yeah.
An internship or a placement?
And well, same thing. Internship, placement, yeah, same thing.
On the weekends or maybe in alternate days they'll work.
No, it's part of the course. It's part of the course. So they make space within the course for them to do the placement. Yeah. The 7th week, very clear. Yeah.
But I think that point of industry contact and mentorship, industry contact and mentorship, having credits is quite a really nice idea.
Yes, yeah. I think in a way what we've done at Falmouth is we've allowed everybody to go and do their own thing and then try and collect that in as good practice. And I think the mentors is good practice. I think the micro internships are good practice. Okay?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Including the, which is including the classroom project or the placements?
Yes.
Which is including the classroom project or not?
Yes.
It is part of the.
It's part of the curriculum. Yeah. So they're creative events management, so they go and do projects, so they on purpose include it as part of it. Okay, another one, short video.
The idea behind it is to provide a very real experience where a cohort of students can come together, work under a degree of pressure actually, as a team to solve a real challenge for a local business or a local organisation. So it's very authentic, it's very meaningful. As an experience, we've found it develops a significant amount of self-awareness, which then leads into people developing far better team skills, far better leadership skills, the ability to reflect a lot on what they're doing and to learn from that. We've actually found that many organisations are really keen to do this because they get the benefit of some very fresh and creative thinking that they won't get from their own team.
We had an organisation come in and they wanted to expand their customer base to a younger market. And this was difficult because as we come onto the course, we hadn't really thought about how to engage people, engage customers, gain sales. And so this was a situation in which we had to go out of our comfort zone and research some things that we were not used to and actually go out and try and sell something to our peers in a very short space of time. So peer assessment to me is very valuable because your peers are there. When you get an assessment from an academic or based on some marking criteria, it can feel as though they're trying to speculate on what was going on. Whereas your peers were there, they're in your team. Receiving feedback is something that different people are better at, some are worse at it. That's a skill, I think, that needs to be developed among every individual. You're never going to have a situation in life that you're always going to receive good feedback. I think that over the 3 years that I've been on the course, people have been getting more and more honest, especially within the business challenge context.
So the way you could model this into assessment, for example, this could be used as just purely a formative form of assessment that then students could reflect upon, or it could be part of an assessment brief where it contributed a certain percentage of marks.
In the business challenges that we perform on this course, we're assessed purely on how we work as a team. You're assessed kind of on how your team performed, how well you guys adjusted to each other, how well leadership was represented, how fairly people were represented in the team, but also you're kind of invited to do an individual reflection on your own contribution to the team. Or this can be kind of contrasted with the peer assessment, the peer feedback that you receive to give you an even deeper reflection. And it was these much softer skills like communication, teamwork and leadership which became so much more important than the harder and technical skills.
So again, another quite interesting model, the 24-hour business challenge. So again, it's very short and sharp, 24 hours, they have to deliver with 24 hours, they probably won't sleep. And again, the student to the right there, the way that they were really clear about those softer skills and how important they were. So last one now. So this is, we talked about, or I don't know whether I can remember what I talked about, that we setting agencies up at Falmouth, and the agencies become the way that we connect with industry. So the photo agency, this is from 1 year before, this year it won the Guardian Entrepreneurial Award. So all the universities in the country went in for it, and we won it. So this is a video of it in its beginning phase. So it's quite interesting of how the photography students become part of this agency.
The agency was born about 6 years ago in the press and editorial BA photography course. And then it was kind of obvious, I guess, across the Institute of Photography that there potentially could be a lot more achieved by promoting an agency across all the photography courses. They would then not just learn the practice of photography, but also understand a lot more about how to work with galleries, how to work with teams of people, how to pitch their ideas for bigger audiences to be across their work. We will then liaise between the clients who are commissioning photography and the students to make sure that we've signed off on a brief, the clients are happy with what's been decided, which is really important because when the students create the work, we want to make sure that if they miss anything, we can always go back to the brief and figure out why that might not have happened and have that discussion. So we kind of always try and get the clients to feed back on the job itself so that we can offer that to the students and get them to understand how what the client's needs are and make sure they're delivering against those. We're helping to advise them professionally on how we see that working. So I guess the assessment is kind of continual and within their operation. I think that within the brief and the commissioning activity, there's lots of building up of character and confidence, and the more experience they get and the more used to that process they get, the more comfortable they are with doing it in the real world. So the kind of skills that they're building in those areas, it's something that you can't do until you start the practice. You can't, you can read and you can develop your own photography practice, but until you're working with clients, it doesn't really come. You kind of need to test it out. Obviously, I manage the agency, and I have just recruited a graduate intern who works closely with me, and that's a rolling position. So the graduate interns work on 10-month contracts, and I'm really focused on that contract and the kind of placement that we offer, not just being a kind of 10-month time period, but that there's true development for the graduate interns within that role. I think one of the things that the agency does very well is it kind of amplifies the academic focus. I see students working on projects through their kind of courses that then when they come and talk to us and they talk about it in a professional context, it puts them together in a way that is really valuable for them. There's just a real buzz and excitement that the agency has. They feel part of this collective, which is really exciting for them. We're really strict with the students that when they agree to do a shoot and commit to a project, that they do have the time to do it and it's not impacting on their academic work. Students can be terrible at responding on emails, so making sure that we've kind of got them working in a professional way before we would ever send them on a professional brief that has high expectations of it. In terms of professional industry, especially in creative arts, there is a sense of competition. It's a very competitive industry, photography itself, and we want to reflect the industry that the students will be moving into, hopefully as freelance artists / photographers. So one of the considerations that we're sensitive to is developing an agency which reflects that competition, which enables them to understand that as much as we want to be inclusive and democratic in our practice, that the nature of photography is competitive, and you do need to kind of work on marketing yourself and ensuring that you are being professional in your practice. So one of the considerations that we have is how we manage that, and I always talk about healthy competition. And there are a few projects we've worked on where other students have said to me that, you know, they were kind of not sure about something, and then they saw some stuff students had done with the agency and kind of went, oh, damn it, I wish I'd done that. And that's the kind of reaction we want, because we feel like it drives the students to be better, to do more, to get more involved. And I think that in itself is reflective of industry, therefore we embrace it. What we're looking to do is to kind of maintain that distinct photography voice that they have, and that hopefully they'll learn to kind of use within their practice. So the agency isn't there to kind of teach them about how photography has to be, but that we're helping develop their practice so it remains unique and distinctive to them.
So I think tomorrow I'm going to talk more about agencies, because the way that we're going to what she didn't mention was that the student gets paid for the agency work that they do. Also, the commissions can be really fantastic commissions. So the Guardian says, oh, we would like a set of photographs about the rural economy in Cornwall, and then a student gets the commission. They've got 3 days to do it, go out and then get it done. So what we've realised more and more is that the agency model, at a certain point, 2021, we want to flip it so that the agency becomes the driver to what the students do. So instead of it being alongside the studies and trying to find space to do it, that actually agency work becomes core. And we are developing a set of agencies under an umbrella agency that then, you know, there'll be a creative advertising agency, there'll be a fashion, you know, made by, for us, fashion label agency. So we're developing agency to at some point become the curriculum. So that's also an interesting approach. So we are running out of time very much now, but so in a way we've been through a lot of information there. So it would be quite nice if people have thoughts or questions or discussion points around employability, either from your own perspective and campus or from the university's perspective, things that you've seen that you think are quite interesting or things that are missing. Any points? When I give you an opportunity now, nobody wants to say anything. So from your point of view, from your university's point of view, is it that some of those models are interesting, or is it interesting from a top-down point of view, or individual courses and departments could start taking those initiatives?
We have some
embedded
learning with the industry.
Yeah.
We have internships. In fact, our final, especially textile and accessory design, the final semester is in the industry. So as you said, you embed it, so that is where they are working, and the work is then launched into the market or wherever. So they are working on real life briefs with an industry mentor and a faculty mentor. So that's what we generally do.
And that's very advanced then. Okay.
I have a reservation. You know, I have a little concern about you send your student in the 7th week to be mentored by. Our industry is not ready for these kind of things. They're always expecting a lot from a student, even if they go between the 3rd and the 4th year, which is an 8 weeks internship. Some of the companies let them learn things and pay attention to what students want to see and learn and be part of the observation scenario. But most of the companies would just make use of them like a multitask staff, you know. And students work without stipend. You know, some of them, even if they're not going, the industry is not concerned. The students do not come out with any learning because they're not made to be, you know, to be part of that. So
we use
how
it
come?
as a human resource. That's all.
Yes. The learning is not so much, although I would say it's a two-way process. A student also sometimes might not be showing that kind of interest. But also, I think the numbers are really big for us.
Yes.
So, the UK industry that way is more supportive. You know, if you are saying that, you know, it is that in 7th semester they start going, then they've not learned so much. 7th week, our industry here, even after 3rd year, they will say that they do not add any value.
Yeah. So I agree with that. So the model that I'm going to talk about tomorrow, with the Technical University, one of the principles we had there was that every project had to have an industrial client from the first project in the first week. So I remember the first project was with DAF Trucks, and it was a 7-week project, and the students didn't know anything. But actually, the project was really successful and used by DAF Trucks as an example of how they could rethink the inside of their cabin. And I was quite surprised by that, because even I was a little bit cynical. One thing that we say at Falmouth is that our undergraduate students are like gold dust. So they're the raw talent that, even without the education we give them, have a raw talent of creativity that industry is crying out for. So the industry often don't want the final rounded version of it. They want the raw talent. They want the raw energy, and they want those, even from a kind of customer focus point of view, they want to know what the students are thinking, doing, believing. So I agree with you that it's very young, and obviously the relationships with local businesses have got to be developed, so they don't just go and make tea or sweep the floor, but they do have a meaningful relationship for that week. But also, I think more and more in the UK, we're looking for industry that looks at the undergraduate cohort as raw talent that they want to work with as soon as possible. So we get lots of creative directors who come and work with us because they see they want to recruit from us. So I agree with every point, and also it's a difficult one. And when you have thousands of students and each one of them's expecting some kind of placement or internship, then it's difficult. But I think that that's what we want to do with the agencies, is having an intermediary that makes sure the student's right for the company, that they then get the professional training they need, even when they're a first-year student, and they can go out, because sometimes those first-year students have amazing raw talent. If you were to give them a project, you know, rural Cornwall, photograph it, they come up with such brilliant version of it that's uneducated in a way. So I'm going to talk about another model tomorrow as well, which shows how actually the big industries are looking for that raw talent more and more, less for the masters, more for the undergraduate, because that raw talent is the thing they're looking for. So
I think raw also is like, you know, you're not carrying any baggage of your knowledge. So which conditions you do think in a certain way. So that is, I think, what is, I think, raw means.
So in a way, how we got around the internship problem is that we have different ways that students can connect with industry. So the mentor, you know, people visiting, so live projects, live competitions, internship, Erasmus and study abroad. There's a whole rafter of stuff that you can do and you can develop, which will help you as well. I'm just going to show just one last video, and it's just about, we've done a lot of research around our study abroad and Erasmus, and we know that if somebody does go on an exchange, we've done the research, and every single student who does an exchange, their grades improve by the final examination. And also, from an employability point of view, and obviously it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, those students go abroad, they make the leap to go abroad, and even that boldness they carry with them, and it's very exciting. So this is just about this Erasmus study abroad.
I don't see there's any particular problem in accommodating incoming students on the Erasmus scheme. What we would always aim for is a kind of a 50-50, so that we've got 3 going out and 3 coming in. So in terms of managing numbers, there's no change there. And the effect that the Erasmus students have on the greater cohort is massively positive. So at the moment we've got 2 students studying with us, one from Finland, Karina, and Eric from Griffiths in the States, in Australia. And both of them have had a massive impact in terms of the cohesion within the year group, and that because they're both very focused and very diligent students, that sort of rubbed off on their peers.
When we're establishing the suitability of the curriculum abroad, we rely on information provided by the host institution's website. Mostly, we can get all the information that we need from that website. Sometimes it's not so clear, and then we talk to the Erasmus office here, and they can usually clarify.
What you've got to allow is students to immerse themselves in the experience, and I think there are much bigger, there are greater benefits to studying abroad than just sort of rigidly sticking to a curriculum. There's the cultural experience, and the countless surveys have been done where they've looked at students that have undertaken Erasmus, and it directly positively impacts on their employability. They're eminently more employable. They come back with broader skill sets. So whether it's that they've done one thing slightly differently than they would have done if they were studying on the course at home, I'm not that concerned because of the greater benefits that it has to those students, and how that then filters across the cohort, and it encourages other people to engage in it as well.
The benefits of students studying abroad far outweigh the risks. Students come back from exchange so independent, they're infused with their study, they're keen to get back into studying at Falmouth, and they've just had this very rich cultural experience that they bring back with them.
So when I first got to Falmouth, the amount of students that were coming in was enormous, and the amount of students that were going out was very small. And obviously that's sometimes connected to the English, so students would like to come and be in an English environment, but also it's quite known that English students, UK students, are not quite as bold at going out. And also, which was very interesting for this training, is lots of courses said to me, yeah, we can't find courses as good enough for them to go out on, and we're worried that their education will go down. And I'm like, get over yourself. Who do you think you are? So if your illustration is RISD illustration not good enough for you? Well, they're okay. Well, go out and talk to them. So I think academics sometimes say, yeah, well, we worry, we want to control it, we want to keep them here, we don't know whether they can, we don't know. So my message was, no, it's not going to happen. Across the university, the students have got to be allowed to go out, because we know that they come back with all these extra skills, and also that their grades get higher, and also their employability is much, much better. So we've grown the Erasmus and study abroad by 300% over the last 4 years, and that's really important to me. I mean, when I was a student, I went to France. I was a fine arts student, and I went to the École de Nîmes in France. I couldn't speak French, so stupid or what, but I went there and just had an amazing time because of the change in cultural experience. And actually, it made me realise that all art schools were the same. I shouldn't worry about internal politics, and I should look outwards because that's the most important thing. So I think that's another element, a kind of surprising element. The study abroad is a surprising element within employability, but a really useful tool that I'm sure you already use a lot, but it's the students coming in as well as the students going out that's really, really important. I mean, maybe you'd agree with that with your job, but I think it's important.
We have quite a few students who come in here for exchange, and the most important thing is a couple of institutes, they continuously send a higher number of students every year. In fact, those numbers are growing. And not just that, because we have a buddy program, they make friends, and a couple of students from Australia have even done businesses where the business actually is being done out of India.
Yes.
You know, post-graduating their
Yes.
studies. And
Yeah.
I mean, India is a second home now.
Yes. Yes. So I think the buddy system is very interesting. So we have a student mentor system that when students come in or before they all, but we've also developed students from abroad coming in, buddy system, but also very importantly, students coming back from being abroad, a buddy system, because students come back and they go, huh, you know, we've had such a good time in New Delhi or somewhere else, that we have a buddy system to support them when they're back. Because sometimes they really get deflated and you need somebody from a higher year who did the same, says, yeah, it's normal, you've had an amazing time in New Delhi, but this is what I did to try and get back on track. Good. All right. So I spent a little bit too long on employability, but I do think it's one of the most important things, and probably one of the most important things about the curriculum. I will package the blended learning into a shorter spot over the next 2.5 days and whiz through that. But I didn't want to do that in 10 minutes. I don't think that's a good idea. Thank you very much again for. You know, it's not the easiest thing to listen to me all day long, but I really appreciated it. And tomorrow, as I say, we're going to start looking at, we're going to go down to 2030 and come back with some different examples. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we asked different speakers to come and talk to us, and Professor Chris Speed from the University of Edinburgh, he came to talk to us about open innovation, so what his thoughts were for open innovation in 2030. Professor Chris Speed is head of design informatics, and actually while I was at Edinburgh I developed the design informatics. The computer science department's so good that they get 90% of all external research funding, and when we merged with the University of Edinburgh College of Art, then we developed this flagship department. So Chris Speed, what's great about Chris Speed is that he brings so much external funding into the university, so whether it's EPSRC or AHRC, so whether it's with the sciences, the arts or philosophy, he brings all of that in. But he also, and I hope you can see that through the presentation, he developed really brilliant projects that are very creative, and those projects are using data and bitcoins and all kinds of things in a different way. So this is just as a little bit of this is what things could be. Obviously, he's more developed than we are at certain things. Just to say, he's presenting after Simon Moores presented. Simon Moores was our first keynote speaker, and he comes from a government think tank. He is on Sky Business channel and all of these kind of things. So our academics gave Simon a very difficult time. So when Chris makes jokes about being worried about the academics, it's because he's seen Simon have such a difficult time with our academics. So it's quite a long video, but hopefully it's useful, and in a way it gives extreme idea of what we're talking about in 2030.
So, it's been interesting, isn't it? In Edinburgh, I was an SL in Plymouth, got the readership, which meant I could just pivot marginally and balance the workload allocation a bit more toward research, and then fortunate enough to get a chair in 2013, a professorship. So I've just moved through the ranks, but as Alan says, I lead on teaching initiatives, and in the context of Edinburgh College of Art, deliver research. So I'm trying to win over, unlike you, but the white line is very clear. The title, I'm not sure it's the right title, the wrong title. What's happening in Edinburgh is what's happening here. There are huge shifts in the economies of how we think about the value and the values of education and research. I think, like you, I'm caught right in the middle. I think I'm playing some of that game well, because as a designer in an art school, I'm able to tap up the engineering and physical sciences well, because, of course, the engineering and physical sciences don't have many design voices, so I play into those. But other times I think I sail too close to the wind, and I worry about the propositions. And this is one of them. The data-driven innovation is trying to be owned by Edinburgh. It wants to be the data-driven innovation centre of the UK, where it has a large city deal to then develop a next generation, of which some of those promises are technologically determinist, as we saw this morning, and there's a kickback from the rest of us in humanities trying to make sure that some of those innovations do have social ethical dimensions. But we'll see. You might not believe me, so see how far I get. Again, I'm going into this eyes wide open, so this is, we started actually one of Alan's ideas, which was to look at how a design school speaks to a school of informatics, way back in 2012, and by 2013, when I've been recruited, design informatics has now become a vernacular, even across the AHRC, where design informatics, which once described two schools coming together, and pompously the School of Informatics is just a computer science school. But informatics makes it sound sexier. But design informatics has become a vernacular for designing with data. There's an idea that in the context of technology, be it a phone or a TV or whatever, there is a stack. And Edinburgh didn't do the human-centred stuff on top of that stack. It did things lower down the stack. Right down is foundation computing and maths. Above it are things like AI and machine learning, natural language processing, which leads to Alexa and things like that, and above there you've got apps and so on and so forth. But Edinburgh's always been a bit lower in that stack, so it meant the informatics school is very sharp on AI, great on ML, but not so good at human-centred things. So we come along as a design school and add value and talk about what is it to design with data. Again, more get-out clauses really. This is my tribe. And I present it not to defend myself at all, but just to talk about what innovation is in my little centre, which is highly interdisciplinary. It's highly centred, it's highly contested, so we make sure that we hire people that contest any assumption that the technology should lead, that health informatics talks about people, social computing, through to neuropolitics, which is how some of these technologies might begin to inform the way you think. How you vote. Of course, we went through the independence vote, you went through Brexit. All the time, you've been looking at European symbols. In Scotland, we were looking at different types of flags. What goes on and how we understand that at high speed is also a tech-driven proposition. On the other hand, it's already down to anthropologists as well, and Sarah, as well as Eva, who's brought in data ethics, consent and privacy. So, again, this is me trying to win over hearts and minds, really, that as a design group, yes, we do have a fascination with data-driven innovation. I am curious and to construct a criticality around what are the implications for agency when we begin to explore not loss of control, but designing with data, not just designing from data. I think many of us, certainly I grew up in an age of designing from data. I would go out to the field, take some photographs, do some interviews, understand from, and come back to a studio and the design from that data. We are beginning to talk about an age when designing with data is beginning to a proposition. So, and then the last one might be design by data, that's when questions around agency are really challenging. But I'm going to use, I've always done this, and what I want to do first is just set out a scene where I think the creative industries are facing some challenges. A wild assumption is that you're all 20th century kids. Is anyone under, or 18 or under? You might be. You're not. So we're all fucked. Honestly, I think it's really challenging with two teenage kids, watching them trade, explore, transgress networks. They don't hold up these pillars of Facebook and Google with the same antagonism or love. They're perpetually shifting, and I think we face a tricky time because most of our identities are constructed through a 20th century of canons, large industrial projects which brought about the DDCMS, and I can't do the Department of Digital Culture and Media and Sports categories, but the verticals which define the creative industries are really, it's very interesting thinking about whether they are the products that a next generation will understand. When actually, if you take part in gaming, you're implicitly involved in every other form of entertainment. So my son might play FIFA, he might play it outside with his pals, he might be collecting some type of cryptocurrency, and actually he's travelling across all of them. And again, just like the College of Arts, Falmouth, we as 20th century scholars still understand that we need to talk about these verticals. And the question is, what do we do in the face of data-driven innovation, which is going to start challenging that? But actually, I thought the sketch that Anne, the VC, has presented is about what happens here. What do we do? What are we helping students come into colleges, universities? Of course, they come from schools. So my son is studying product design. Now, actually, we lead product design in Edinburgh now, and product design isn't off the back of some assumptions. It's about vacuum cleaners. It's about a whole bunch of questions around materiality, sociality, economics, business modelling, so on and so forth. But we have to own that space because students are coming in with pretty primitive assumptions. Or are they? Because I don't think our kids are now. I think they've got very sophisticated relationships with digital economies. And I don't know if they are held up by these propositions. At the end of the 20th century, though, we do talk about the difference between push media and pull media. And I better just recycle back to this one. So the 20th century, we were defined through push. We grew up with Kellogg's, cornflakes, Heinz, great brands, the VW, so on and so forth, and we were defined by them. And we understand, actually implicitly, that you construct cultures and economies through those. And they are beginning to collapse. They're under some sort of threat. If we take Kellogg's cornflakes as an example, if you wouldn't mind thinking your mind's eye of a Kellogg's cornflake, throw it into your mind's eye, you're visual thinkers, probably we share the same Pantone colour. Now it is an astonishing achievement to do that through the 20th century, to construct an imaginary which is commensurate across the entire room. I don't think you can do that in the digital economy now. And that's what the 20th century did. It constructed these globalised projects where a cornflake, and how many were they produced, were span up in the imagination of consumers and then pushed. And it's pretty crude. You spin it up, you spin up a factory and you push it. And you push it to supermarkets. The value chain, the supply chain is incredibly crude. All they have to do is balance the books along that value chain. You and I, we go and pick it up and then we do things with it. There's no question that Kellogg's care about the recycling, the circular economy. There's no circular conversation because they've built a very lightweight model of distribution, manufacture and production and push. And we're very, very well trained. And that's where I worry about us, because we do have to do some interrogation, because we've grown up with push models. You're perfectly happy going to a supermarket. It's defined the way that you've grown up families and orientated your lifestyles. But the digital economy comes along and begins to say that value isn't defined in a lab at Kellogg's in the 1920s, it's co-produced. And the next generation of creatives are understanding that value is part of co-production, and that you won't find a space which isn't underpinned by a digital economy that needs to understand that the role of data is to broker what that value is. In the end, I don't like Kellogg's cornflakes that much. It's a bit kind of, you can feel it sitting in your gut. But making crispy cakes with my daughter was a defining part of her childhood and mine. So what's the value, the co-production of value there? Arguably, Kellogg's don't care. They keep pushing. They really want me, if you look on the back of Kellogg's cornflakes package, is to take a photograph of what the outcome, what the product is, and then send it back so they can modify their propositions. But they don't need to. They're pushing. I really don't. I'm really happy with regulation to support the production of toilet roll at scale, rather than managing small things which are exquisite and bespoke. So we have this really tricky challenge, you and I'm 48, 70, born in 70, understanding what the production is and what the business models are, because they're all turning on their head. Now, in the pull economy, we co-construct value. I think that's the big turn for me for the creative industries. But we don't do it like this. We don't pull in a linear manner in the same way that Kellogg's push in a linear manner. We don't keep an account of how our checks and balances work in our value chain. We're very strange people. You'll go to a pub maybe later. If 3 of you go to that pub and you have 2 pints, 1 of you will walk away without paying. I suspect at Christmas this year you didn't keep an Excel spreadsheet monitoring your expenditure and then your apparent income according to gifts. The gift economy and how we know value is much messier. It's much more social, and we have social as well as cultural as well as economic metrics to understanding where value is made. So I think the centre particularly tries to explore some of this. This isn't going to stop. I do think some push economies are perfectly well placed for good ecological reasons, but we need to understand how we play in this space, because you are not pushers,